Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to rank all healers from worst to best for Mythic Plus dungeons as they are right now in the Shadowlands beta. Now that the release date is coming closer, everyone is looking to see what class they want to main or play as an alt. I've spent all my time playing the beta over the last few weeks testing healers with many different covenants and builds, and I want to share my insight with you. Keep in mind, these rankings are specifically for dungeon gameplay. I find raid rankings a bit less interesting for healers, since the best ones often just come down to which ones are the most effective on the last couple bosses. Before we start, I'm going to give the same disclaimer that I gave in my tank ranking video, and if you haven't checked that one out, be sure to watch it next. This is still the beta. Everything is changing fast. I'm only ranking where healers are right now in this moment on the beta. Don't worry if the healer that you prefer is low on the list, it hardly means anything right now. I would recommend picking a class that you want to play and think is the most fun for the start of a new expansion. If you feel roadblocked later, maybe stuck in arenas or can't find a guild, the option to reroll or change specs is always there later. It's definitely possible that beta could be a good indicator of how healers are likely to perform though, especially when it comes to their basic playstyle and rotation. There haven't been really any big reworks in the healer category, so if you're familiar with how a healer played a year or two ago, it won't feel too foreign now. There have been a number of changes to Mythic Plus though. With new dungeon design comes new encounters that may cater to different healing styles. Another thing that is very hard to factor in is group composition. Different perks of different healers may be extremely valuable or completely useless depending on what other classes are in the meta. Mistweaver damage is quite low, however the Mystic Touch debuff makes up for that in some way if the group comp is heavy on physical damage. But if the main tank is a Brewmaster, bringing a Mistweaver becomes less appealing. Likewise, if there are no battle res classes that are popular, having a Druid healer in the group will seem like a must. There are three main factors I think about when judging healers right now. The first and most important is their healing coverage. When I say coverage, I mean the ability to heal all of the different types of encounters. A dungeon healer is going to need to get through insane checks on single target healing, sustained healing, burst healing, and so on. If a healer can put out insane HPS numbers on a stacked 5-man group, but then fall apart when they have to move around or struggle to keep one target alive, they're going to lose points in this category still. There really is a very diverse mix of situations in dungeons. Tanks are going to be considerably weaker with the gear squish, so being able to give consistent tank healing across hard-hitting packs is important. There's also a lot of sustained AoE, especially with the new Mythic Plus affix Prideful. Overall, I would say many of the bosses in Shadowlands require more healing than in Battle for Azeroth. I think this is a good thing, and as a healer, I'm happy that the most important thing I can bring to the group is solid healing. Next is utility. When you aren't healing, what sorts of things are you bringing to the group that help speed up the run? In pug situations, utility may even be the most important factor when deciding what healer you invite. Do you need a battle res in the group? Do you need a mind soothe or a ring of peace to skip a pack? Do you need a specific covenant to activate the group buff? Oh, I shouldn't have mentioned that one. Let's not talk about that here. Your utility is often what separates you from other healers, and is often what is recognized the most by your teammates. Utility is a really broad category and can be hard to classify, since it can change greatly depending on the dungeon and affixes. Last is damage. Although this is less important to worry about, it still matters some. Being able to contribute damage helps speed up the dungeon and leaves more room for errors, and when you're doing dungeons and pugs, there's going to be a lot of those. Early in the expansion, damage doesn't matter as much since groups are mainly just trying to survive and get through the dungeon in one piece. However, as the limits start to get pushed and every second starts to count, healer damage will become more and more important. Damage also comes in many forms. Some damage can be easy, and other damage can only happen if there's no healing to be done. Damage can be focused on one target or spread across many targets. I tried my best to group this into just one category, but there's definitely a lot more to expand on here. Now, let's go over the rankings. There's only 6, so I'm just going to go from worst to best and not make any sort of tier list or anything. I'm going to start with the least desirable dungeon healer and go through all of them until the strongest. In last place, I have to put Holy Priest. Maybe it's just because Holy and Discipline share the same class, so all of the priest love goes to Discipline, but Holy Priest is really feeling weak right now. Although Holy has some pretty strong single target healing, they feel weaker than Discipline in nearly every other way. All of the Covenant abilities seem like they were simply designed for Disc in mind and not Holy. Like, how could a Holy Priest even be using something like Mind Games? The Kyrian Boon is one of the only decent options for Holy, and it's insanely powerful in Mythic Plus for Disc. The legendaries don't feel great to use either, and you're doing less damage than a Disc overall. For a short time, Holy did have Mind Blast and Mind Seer, however these abilities were already taken away. Look, don't get me wrong, if you're a Holy Priest fan, you'll be able to get through most content and enjoy it. However, right now, your most important skill in difficult progression rating or high Mythic Plus as a Holy Priest is how well you can play another spec. Next, I'm going to say Mistweaver. I think this ranking is the most likely to be wrong later on, however, I have to put it here for now. Mistweaver in the beta is really buggy right now, with many of the abilities not working as intended. The biggest strength that Mistweaver has right now is its insanely strong single target healing. This actually feels great in pugs when you have that one guy that decides he really wants to stand in bad, or the tank that feels like his shield broke halfway through the dungeon. However, Mistweaver suffers from weaker AoE healing and also can't heal much when moving. Essence Font is great for 20-man raids, but for dungeons it doesn't feel great to press unless you absolutely have to. Mistweaver is also traditionally one of the lower DPS healers, and has to be in melee to deal all of its damage. Mana management is one of the weaker points as well, and with all of the intense AoE healing in dungeons, you might really feel it. It's very possible all of this can be fixed with a good implementation of the new reworked GG and the Fistweaving legendary. Being able to convert damage to healing, while throwing out some enveloping mist to targets who are in more danger during GG, could make Mistweaver a really solid spec to play. But as it stands right now, I can't in good faith put it higher on this list. Resto Shaman was my first healer in WoW, and although I'd like to place it higher, I'm going to have to put it at 4th. Resto Shaman is an extremely powerful raid healer, specializing in stacked AoE fights. However, when it comes to dungeons, they can be lacking. Most of Shaman's AoE healing comes from Chain Heal and Healing Rain, which requires your group to be reasonably close together. In fights that require a lot of movement and spreading out, it can be really difficult to keep up as a Shaman. Shaman's single target healing can also be a bit lacking, especially considering they have no damage reduction external aside from Spirit Link. You can definitely push high keys as a Shaman, however it mostly requires a coordinated group, and the pug experience can be a bit tougher than most other healers. Shaman has strong single target damage and gains more with 1 or 2 additional enemies, however it lacks a lot in the AoE damage department compared to other healers. On top of that, none of the damage from Shaman is easy or passive. You need to be constantly applying flame shocks and be using your lava burst procs. One major saving grace that Shaman has though is an interrupt. Having an interrupt as a healer is a huge quality of life increase, and can help prevent a ton of damage. Earthshield being baseline now helps some, however I'd still like to see some more help with Shamans, either more single target healing or an external damage reduction. Next, I'm going to put Holy Paladins. Traditionally, Holy Paladins scale well with more stats, so it's no surprise to see them knock down a couple levels. Holy Paladins have strong healing during cooldowns, and with Avenging Wrath, Aura Mastery, and Holy Avenger, they can have a lot of coverage. Paladins have pretty strong single target healing as well, especially with the addition of Word of Glory. Although they have to be in melee range to do damage, Paladin's damage is really strong compared to the other healers, second only to Disc Priest. The biggest problem that Paladins face right now is their AoE healing. Although it's not too hard to top your party with a strong cooldown like Wings, you won't always have one available. Shadowlands has quite a few AoE healing checks in dungeons right now, especially considering the seasonal affix will be 5 of them in every key. On top of that, one of the biggest benefits to Holy Paladin damage is that you can use all of your cooldowns offensively as well. However, if your team is struggling to stay alive, that's much less realistic. Paladins also have some pretty good utility. Blessing of Freedom and Protection can completely negate some pretty deadly boss mechanics. I think Paladins are in a pretty good place right now, as it's hard to make them too powerful for AoE healing and not completely busted in raid. And second is Discipline Priest. I was really torn between second and first place. They're pretty close right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if the top of the ladder in Season 1 was dominated by priests. Disc priests have strong group healing with big cooldowns like Barrier, Ascendant's Boon from the Kyrian Covenant, and Rapture to cover heavy burst moments. The changes to bursting mean that priests will be an exceptionally strong healer against this affix. Depending on what spells exactly clear Grievous, priests could be one of the best healers for many affixes, which is a very welcome change for them. Mind Soothe was an unexpectedly good utility that was brought back, allowing priests to help with skipping certain packs. This seems especially great for pugs. When you see your hunter mindlessly strafing near some dangerous pack, you can just soothe the pack and it reduces their aggro range. Discipline damage is also very solid, and considering it's part of their healing rotation, you're always going to be doing damage as a Disc Priest. Two minor weaknesses of Priest are their reliance on cooldowns and their single target healing. The cooldown dependency isn't nearly as bad as Holy Paladin, given how short of a cooldown Rapture is. However, back-to-back heavy damage moments from bosses especially require good planning and defensive usage. Single target healing from Priest isn't great, although they do have Rapture and Pain Suppression to use in an emergency. Priests definitely prefer tank classes like Vengeance DH or Blood DK when they can do most of their tank healing via Atonement. That leaves Resto Druid, currently on top. Resto Druid's toolkit is just very well suited for 5-man content. They have extremely consistent healing even without cooldowns, and with the addition of Night Fae Convoke, they have a great way to catch up their party's health if they fall behind. Druid has one of the strongest mastery mechanics among all healers in Mythic Plus, allowing multiple HOTS stacked up to increase healing. This makes them exceptionally good at extended healing, both in groups or just single target. Almost all of the Druid kit can be cast on the move, so they can still put out a lot of healing even on fights that require a lot of movement. Ironbark is a very strong external, reducing incoming damage and increasing healing on only a 90-second cooldown. Druid's utility is also extremely powerful. Soothe, Vortex, Typhoon, Stealth, and most importantly Battle Res. Engineering Res isn't going to be in the game on release, and it looks like the top tanks right now are Brewmaster and Vengeance, so they don't have Battle Res either. There are many strong DPS classes like Warlock or Death Knights that have Battle Res, so I definitely don't want everyone to think I'm saying that Resto Druid is mandatory, but it is an extremely valuable utility to have. Druid's damage is a bit lower compared to Disc and Holy Paladin, however I think this isn't as important for the first season. Although Druid's damage is middle of the pack, it comes at a very cheap cost. Sunfire makes up for almost half their damage in dungeons, and is incredibly easy to apply and maintain on large packs. Even if you aren't doing any cat weaving, you can still contribute meaningful damage with just Sunfire. That's all 6 healers, ranked from my experience running dungeons in the Shadowlands beta. Keep in mind there are still many changes to come, and the game is only in beta right now. The first season, everyone will be figuring stuff out and learning what's good, so don't stress out about the meta and just play what you enjoy. Do you think I made any huge mistakes? If you disagree with my list, let me know what you would change in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be coming out with lots of World of Warcraft Shadowlands beta content, as well as in-depth guides and walkthroughs when the game is released. Happy keying!